The Galactic Dominion loved dramatic announcements. They didn't simply send diplomats. They launched a full-scale spectacle across half the galaxy. On more than 2,000 controlled worlds, citizens watched projections of glowing banners and thunderous orchestral fanfares, declaring that a new negotiation mission was underway. One aimed at a developing planet called Earth to the Dominion. Earth was a curiosity, a world barely unified, driven by emotion, unpredictable, and still proud of tiny technological toys. Their council had predicted that the humans would bow quickly to order, grateful to join a superior interstellar power. But a few officers, especially one scarred strategist, had murmured warnings: do not mistake chaos for weakness. His concerns were waved away as the ramblings of a weary veteran. So the Dominion fleet descended toward Earth in a diamond formation. Hundreds of polished vessels catching the sunlight like drifting shards of metal, their ships slowed above the United Nations designated landing zone, engines humming in harmony. Dozens of holographic greetings bloomed around them in multiple alien dialects, a floating chorus of diplomacy. The Dominion expected crowds, soldiers, marching bands, terrified leaders lining up in shock. What they found instead was casualness. A half-circle of human representatives stood waiting with the energy of people queuing for morning transport. Some held clipboards. One woman yawned. The display of indifference rippled through the alien delegation like static. Among the humans stood a single man with a paper cup in hand, steam curling lazily from it. He wore a tailored black suit, but his posture suggested he had no real intention of impressing anyone. A wing sat beside him, large, dark-furred, and unnervingly still. Its eyes tracked the descending platforms with unblinking precision. The Dominion delegates, tall insectoid scholars, crystalline tacticians, and avian envoys with metallic feathers, exchanged uncertain glances as they stood up onto the landing field. Their translators detected no hostility from the humans, yet something felt misaligned. The man with the coffee smiled warmly. "Welcome to Earth," he said with a gentle nod. "Hope your trip through the void didn't get too boring." His tone was friendly, almost amused, not fearful, not impressed. It irritated the lead Dominion diplomat, an arachnid figure with gem-studded mandibles. It stepped forward, towering over the humans. "We greet your species with authority," it declared. "Prepare your world for integration under Dominion governance." Several humans stiffened, trading glances. The man with the coffee simply nodded, as if the diplomat had commented on the weather. "Strong opening line," he said pleasantly, "but you might want to pace yourselves. Earth gets jumpy when strangers start talking about taking charge." Behind him, the dog released a low rumble, soft yet deliberate. The sound vibrated through the air like a warning kept on a leash. The crystalline envoy flickered with shifting colors. "Where is your primary negotiator? We were told Earth would send a leader of significant standing." "Oh, she's around," the man replied. "Just finishing something important. I'm the pre-conversation." He sipped his coffee. "Trust me, you'll like her. She's very motivating." The avian emissary tilted its head, feathers ringing softly. "And you? What authority do you carry?" "People call me John," he answered. "Titles get messy. I mostly keep things peaceful." The dog tapped its tail once against the ground, a slow, controlled movement that somehow drew more attention than the glowing Dominion fleet. The aliens attempted a show of power, holograms of conquered worlds, displays of technological triumph, surges of energy licking across weapon casings. Each display meant to intimidate. John nodded politely. "Very creative. Looks like you practiced." The arachnid diplomat hissed, "Earth will submit to Dominion directives. Resistance." John raised a hand, still smiling. "Let's avoid big words like resistance. They make my friend here." He nodded at the dog. "Think someone needs biting." The dog emitted another low growl. The Dominion delegation finally felt it, a subtle, creeping wrongness. John's calm wasn't normal. The dog's stillness wasn't animal. Something here wasn't what it appeared. Then the ground trembled. A shadow passed overhead. John's eyes brightened, and he murmured, "She's here." The real negotiator was arriving. The tremor rolled across the landing zone like a silent announcement. Even the dog lifted its head, ears tilting toward the sky as the shadow thickened above them. A single dark dropship drifted downward. No lights, no musical fanfare, no decorative projections. It moved like a void, swallowing sunlight, absorbing attention without trying. The Dominion delegates instinctively stepped back. The dropship touched down without a sound. Dust billowed gently and a solitary ramp unfolded. No guards marched out. No ceremonial banners appeared. Only one figure emerged. A woman. Her long coat swayed with each measured step, dust brushing against its hem. She didn't stride with arrogance or theatrics. She walked with the steady calm of someone who knew she would be obeyed. Her expression was unreadable. Not cold, not angry, just final. Every alien diplomat stiffened. Every human stood a little straighter. John's smile widened like he'd been waiting for this exact moment. "There she is," he said softly, lifting his coffee in greeting. "Right on schedule." The woman approached the Dominion delegation. Her eyes didn't dart around or assess, they judged, weighing each alien as though measuring the consequences they carried. Silence followed her like a cloak. When she stopped, her shadow touched theirs. The arachnid diplomat's mandibles clicked involuntarily. "You are the one in authority here?" She didn't answer immediately. She simply looked at the great Dominion warships suspended above them, and then returned her gaze to the diplomats. "You brought warships to a diplomatic invitation," she said. Her voice was calm, smooth, unimpressed. Interesting interpretation of the word peace. The crystalline envoy flickered uncertainly. "These vessels are symbolic, a display of our honor and strength." "Strength," she repeated, tilting her head. "Symbols become threats when pointed at the wrong people." The dog padded to her side, sitting in perfect alignment with her stance. Alert, taut, protective. She briefly brushed her hand over its fur, a gesture so gentle that the Dominion delegates recoiled at the contrast between her softness and her presence. "You frightened him," she added. "I dislike when guests do that." The avian emissary sputtered, feathers rattling. "We made no hostile move. No weapon was activated." John coughed. "Well, your first sentence was basically kneel or be reorganized. Humans aren't fond of reorganization." She gave a single nod. "Tone matters, especially on Earth." The arachnid diplomat gathered itself. "We came expecting structured negotiation. Do you claim we have violated custom?" "Not violated," she replied, "ignored. There's a difference." Her attention snapped back to the fleet overhead. The warships shimmered, proud and towering symbols of Dominion superiority. To the aliens, they represented an empire's reach. To her, they looked like childish toys brandished at the wrong playground. Then she turned back to the diplomats. "You didn't come to negotiate," she said softly. "You came to measure us." The crystalline envoy's glow trembled. "That is protocol. We assess potential members." "And you expected Earth to behave as prey," she continued. "Predictable, intimidated, obedient." Her eyes sharpened. "Earth is none of those things." The dog growled again at low rumbling thunder beneath the conversation. John leaned closer to the aliens. "He's very good at reading the room." The Dominion delegates felt it now. The shift in atmosphere. Their ship engines hummed irregularly. The air tasted different, charged. Something was happening behind the scenes, unseen yet intentional. The woman clasped her hands behind her back. "We intercepted your communication packets," she said. "You planned to test our compliance. You assumed our leadership would fracture. You hoped our defenses were primitive." Her tone remained almost bored. "You were wrong." The arachnid diplomat tried to reassert control. "Your world lacks the military complexity to—" John tapped his wrist device. For half a second, everything flickered. The sky dimmed. The Dominion ships stuttered in their hover. A synchronized wave passed across their hulls, dimming every weapon indicator, shutting down every visible targeting array. The alien diplomats froze in horror. "Our systems," the crystalline envoy whispered. "They're offline." She nodded. "Temporarily." The avian emissary stammered. "How? Our technology—" "Your ships scanned for nearby networks," she replied. "They connected without understanding what they touched." John grinned. "Earth's digital ecosystem is messy. and very, very territorial. The Dominion delegates stared, trembling. The woman stepped closer, her voice quiet, merciless, absolute. You brought threats to our home, so we removed them. She leaned in just enough for the diplomats to feel the weight of her certainty. Now, she said, we negotiate on Earth's terms. The Dominion diplomats stood locked in horrified silence. Their towering ships, immaculate, shimmering monoliths of their empire's pride, now drifted above them like wounded beasts, engines offline, weapons asleep, communication arrays as silent as dead stars. Nothing terrified a Dominion envoy more than vulnerability, and nothing terrified them more than realizing that vulnerability had been engineered by a species they'd considered primitive. The woman watched their panic with unreadable calm. John tapped his coffee cup lightly with his thumb. Don't worry, he said. If we meant to do anything explosive, we'd have skipped the conversation part. The crystalline envoy's glow fractured in distress. You disabled our vessels. Such interference violates every treaty in the quadrant. You arrived with weaponized diplomacy, she replied. You violated peace before you stepped off the platform. The dog circled once around the Dominion delegates, its movement slow, deliberate. The aliens stepped back as though the creature carried a gravitational pull. The avian emissary's wings twitched. We did not intend to start conflict. She broke her gaze away from them, long enough to observe the fleet again. The silent warships, the dimmed lights, the emptiness of their communications. Then she looked back at the aliens. You didn't intend conflict, she echoed. You intended dominance. You assumed we would panic. You assumed we would yield, but you didn't consider the most important part of our nature. She stepped closer. When humans are threatened, she said quietly, we don't collapse. Her voice sharpened. We plan. John added, sometimes way ahead of time. The ground beneath them vibrated faintly, a subtle reminder that the planet itself was paying attention, or perhaps that something beneath the surface was. The arachnid diplomat rasped, what have you done to our fleet? John shrugged. Technically, nothing harmful, just switch things off. She clasped her hands behind her back, her posture deceptively relaxed. Your ships connected to local signals automatically upon arrival, a feature designed for your convenience. We used it. The crystalline envoy trembled. Our systems are shielded. Shielded against things you recognize, she replied, not against a world that adapts faster than you expected. The avian emissary's feathers rattled desperately. Your species is chaotic, unpredictable. We analyzed your history. You fight one another constantly. You are fragmented. How could you achieve unity? She finished. You misunderstand us. John nodded. Humans argue constantly, but the moment someone else tries to control us, he gave a low whistle. We get very organized. The woman allowed a faint, humorless smile. Conflict did not weaken us. It taught us how to prepare. The dog growled softly, a low vibration, as though reinforcing her point. The Dominion diplomats exchanged glances, searching for an explanation, a loophole, a path out. There must be misunderstanding, the arachnid insisted. Our empire seeks order. Guidance, we bring stability to weaker civilizations. You confuse stability with suppression, she replied. You confuse order with obedience. Her voice cut the air like a cold blade. And you confuse humanity with prey. The crystalline envoy nearly collapsed under the weight of the words, we misinterpreted your capabilities, but you cannot hold us indefinitely. Our empire, your empire, she said, stepping closer, is a structure built on fear. She leaned in. Fear works on species who break. We don't break. John added softly, we bend a little, then snap back twice as hard. A faint hum passed overhead, the Dominion fleet attempting to reboot, only to fail again. The sound echoed like a warning. The avian emissary asked, voice tight with dread, if you have such control, why speak to us at all? Because peace matters, she said simply. But peace cannot exist when one side pretends superiority. The dog barked once, sharp, deliberate. She pointed at the Dominion delegates. This is your first lesson. The envoys froze. When you threaten humans, you don't weaken us. You clarify us. You force us to become precise, strategic, united. John lifted his wrist device, and very, very inconvenient. Her voice dropped to a whisper that carried more weight than any shout. We don't fear you. She straightened. You should fear what your assumptions woke up. The ground trembled again, stronger this time. Dust shifted around their feet. The Dominion delegates stared at the earth, terrified. The woman's expression softened into something almost sympathetic. Lesson 1, she repeated. Never measure humanity with old rulers. She turned her gaze toward the distant horizon, because we've outgrown them. The tremors grew stronger, slow, rhythmic, like something massive shifting far below. Dust spiraled upward in thin, swirling strands. Even the humans on the perimeter stiffened. Though none of them looked afraid, it was as if they had been waiting for this moment. The Dominion envoys clung to whatever dignity they had left. What is moving under your landing zone? The crystalline envoy asked, its body flickering like a failing beacon. John glanced down at the vibrating ground. Oh, that, not an attack. More like a reveal. The arachnid diplomat's mandibles twitched. Your world hides weapons underground? Not weapons, the woman answered, safeguards. The Dominion delegation backed up as the cracks widened. Thin lines cut across the concrete, glowing faintly as if lit from beneath. The dog rose and walked forward, positioning itself between the humans and the aliens. Its head lowered. Its gaze tracked the widening fracture. The avian emissary flapped its wings in alarm. We scanned this area. There were no structures of significance. You scanned the surface, she replied. We don't store our important things where strangers can peek. A deep rumble rolled across the field, the sound of ancient machinery awakening from a sleep so deep that even Earth's tectonic plates had nearly forgotten them. The envoys stumbled back as the first column emerged. A metal cylinder broke through the cracked ground, rising slowly, silently. It was black, smooth, and tall enough to cast a shadow over the diplomats. Another followed beside it, then another, forming a growing ring around the landing zone. Monoliths, each with no visible weapons, no insignias, no openings, just towering sentinels humming with power. The arachnid diplomat choked on its own breath. This technology, it's not in your records. Your world has no documentation of constructs like these. John smirked. Good. Means we hid them properly. These structures, the crystalline envoy stammered, are not even emitting Dominion-recognizable frequency patterns. They weren't built for you to recognize, the woman said. They were built for us. As the monoliths reached full height, glowing veins of light pulsed across their surfaces. The sky responded. Satellites that had been invisible a moment earlier flickered into view, aligning themselves in geometric patterns overhead like a constellation forming in real time. The Dominion delegates cried out in disbelief. You had an orbital network hidden? That's impossible. We detected nothing. You detected only what we allowed you to detect, she answered. John raised his wrist device again. Earth's good at camouflage. Comes from spending too long pretending we're smaller than we are. The monoliths hummed in unison. A thin sheet of shimmering energy spread outward from each one, connecting with its neighbors. Within seconds, a massive translucent dome took shape around the entire landing field, trapping the envoys and shielding the humans without imprisoning them. The avian emissary stared up at the sky, voice cracking. You've created a containment lattice with no visible power source. In under a minute. It was already here, she corrected. We only turned it on. The crystalline envoy flickered violently. This is not negotiation. This is coercion. No, she replied. This is clarity. The dog barked, a deep, resonant sound that bounced off the monoliths. She continued. Your empire believes control creates peace. Earth believes understanding does. John added, but understanding requires honesty. Hard to get that when one side shows up with glowing guns. The Dominion envoys shook, their confidence dissolving under the weight of a world that had prepared for them long before they arrived. The arachnid diplomat managed to rasp, You intended this from the start. We intended peace, she said, but we prepare for the alternative. A thin beam of energy drifted from the satellites overhead, connecting delicately with the monoliths. The dome shimmered brighter, the air vibrating softly. Your ships, she continued, are locked. Your communications are silenced. You cannot flee. You cannot escalate. John gave a small shrug. But you're alive. That means you're still part of the conversation. The crystalline envoy whispered, "What do you want from us?" "We want truth," she said, stepping right up to them. "Your real intentions, your real motives. The lines between your diplomacy and your domination." Her eyes narrowed. "And we want you to understand something your empire never accounted for." She placed a hand gently on the dog's head. It stared up at the trembling aliens, calm and unreadable. "We protect what's ours." The ground ceased shaking. The monolith stood silent and tall. The sky glowed with human-made stars, and the Dominion envoys understood, finally, what had been waiting beneath their feet long before they arrived. The dome shimmered around them like a giant translucent heartbeat, pulsing with quiet authority. The Dominion envoys huddled together, their earlier confidence shattered. Above them, their once imposing warships floated helplessly, dimmed like lanterns running out of fuel. The entire landing zone felt suspended between judgment and revelation. The woman stepped forward, and the dome's light shifted as if acknowledging her presence. "We're done with introductions," she said. "Now we begin the real conversation." John straightened his suit, brushing a bit of dust from his sleeve. "This is the part where honesty stops being optional." The arachnid diplomat trembled. "We came to establish order." "You came to assert superiority," she corrected. "Let's not pretend otherwise." The crystalline envoy's fractured glow flickered. "But your response, your network, the structure around us, none of it aligns with your recorded technological capacity." "There's a reason for that," John replied. "We stopped publishing the truth about our tech a long time ago." The Dominion envoys stared at him, horrified. The woman clasped her hands behind her back, her posture steady and deliberate. "You misread our history. You saw wars, chaos, conflict, and assumed they weakened us." She took a slow step closer. "But conflict taught us how to evolve faster than any empire could track." The avian emissary rasped, "If you had such defenses, why hide them?" "Because true strength isn't displayed," she said. "It's held in reserve." John lifted his wrist again. The monoliths hummed. A ripple shot through the dome, a wave of energy so subtle the aliens barely noticed it at first. Then their translators buzzed. Their receivers crackled. Their emergency channels flickered awake for half a second, only to broadcast a single phrase across the Dominion's entire long-range network. "Earth does not submit." The Dominion delegates froze in horror. The arachnid stammered, "You used our fleet as a relay point. That transmission will reach every controlled world." John nodded. "That was the idea." The crystalline envoy collapsed onto trembling limbs. "You don't understand. That broadcast marks us as compromised. Our empire will assume we've been captured. They will retaliate. They'll panic," she corrected. "There's a difference." The envoys stared up at her, unable to breathe or blink. She continued calmly. "Your empire is stretched thin. You rule through intimidation, not respect. You hold dozens of worlds in place through fear alone. And now," John added lightly, "they'll see you lost to a planet you dismissed." A silence fell, heavy, airless. The avian emissary whispered, "What will become of the Dominion?" "That depends on how your people respond," she replied. "Empires built on fear collapse the moment their image cracks." Her eyes sharpened. "Consider this the first crack." The dog padded forward again, sitting beside her, ears tilted, gaze steady. The envoys flinched as though it were a lion instead of a quiet guardian. The woman knelt briefly to scratch behind its ear. "He thinks we should move on to the next step." The arachnid diplomat took a staggering step back. "There is a next step?" "Yes," she said. "Correction." John cracked a small smile. "You'll want to brace for this part." She turned away from the envoys and walked toward the nearest monolith. When she touched its surface, it lit like a vertical river of white flame. The other monoliths responded instantly, their lines glowing brighter, their hum deepening until the dome itself resonated like a tuning fork. The Dominion envoys shook violently. "What are you doing?" "Presenting the truth," she answered. "Not just to you, to everyone." The dome projected upward, forming a massive holographic map of the Dominion's territory. Entire star systems appeared overhead, glowing in faint spectral lines. Then those lines began shifting, breaking, branching, fading, representing rebellion, defection, and collapse. "This is the future of your empire," she said. The crystalline envoy wailed, "You can't possibly know." "We've intercepted your internal communications," John said. "Your empire is already fracturing. You were hoping Earth would be your stabilizing trophy." She stepped back toward them. "You needed our compliance to prevent the collapse." Her voice hardened. "You won't have it." The monoliths dimmed, the holographic projection dissolving into sparks that drifted upward like dying fireflies. She looked at the Dominion envoys with a quiet, devastating finality. "Your empire will fall, but it won't be because of us." John finished softly. "It'll fall because you built it wrong." The dog barked, sharp, commanding. The sky answered with a single, thunderous pulse of light. The sky cracked with a pulse of white light. Not violent, not destructive, but final. It rippled across the dome, across the monoliths, across the stunned faces of the Dominion envoys. Above them, their disabled warships flickered like ghosts trying to remember their purpose. The woman stepped back toward the diplomats, her coat brushing softly against the dusty ground. The dog followed her with silent precision, each paw striking the earth as if it was marking the end of something monumental. John sighed, finished the last sip of his coffee, and tossed the empty cup into a portable bin. A soldier slid toward him as if rehearsed. "All right," he said quietly, "time for cleanup." The Dominion envoys huddled together, trembling. The crystalline envoy whispered, voice cracking like a shard of glass under strain. You have doomed us. Our empire will not survive this message." She shook her head. "We didn't doom anything. You built your empire like a tower of ice. We merely held a mirror up to it." The arachnid diplomat clicked its mandibles in panic. "Our leaders will see our silence. They will assume rebellion. They will retaliate." "Against whom?" she asked calmly. "Half your outer colonies already question them. Your distant fleets are already stretched too thin to maintain order." John nodded. "Not to mention your admirals hate each other. One spark, and they'll tear your hierarchy apart themselves." The avian emissary sank to the ground. "So we are finished?" "No," she said softly. The envoys looked up at her in desperate confusion. "You are not finished. You're free." They blinked. "Free?" the crystalline envoy repeated, unable to comprehend the word. She approached them slowly, not as a threat, but as someone offering truth that carried weight instead of violence. "Your empire never asked what you wanted. It demanded obedience. It demanded fear. The moment you hesitated even slightly, you became expendable." Her voice gentled. "What we did today wasn't destruction. It was interruption. Your empire was already cracking. We simply gave the cracks permission to widen." John added, "That's what happens when you bluff your way through the galaxy with oversized ships in bad manners." The dog barked once, a short, sharp note that echoed strangely through the dome. The woman placed her palm on the nearest monolith. At her touch, the glowing veins dimmed one by one. The others quieted as well. The dome flickered, then dissolved into particles of light, drifting into the afternoon air. The envoys looked up in shock. The barrier was gone. The woman gestured toward their ships. "Try your systems again." The crystalline envoy hesitated, then touched the device embedded in its chest plate. The ships overhead hummed, engines flickering back to life, weapons reinitializing, communications reconnecting. They gasped. "You restored them," the arachnid diplomat whispered. "Yes," she replied. "You came to us under false assumptions, but we are giving you a chance to return under honest terms." John added, "Preferably without the fireworks this time." The avian emissary rose shakily to its feet. "What do you expect from us now?" "Truth," she answered. "When you return to your empire, tell them what Earth truly is. Not a target, not a subordinate, a world that will negotiate, but never kneel," John finished. The dog barked in agreement. The envoys exchanged glances, and for the first time since landing, their expressions reflected not fear, but clarity. "We were wrong about you," the crystalline envoy admitted. "Completely," she nodded. "Correct your course, or your empire will destroy itself long before we ever raise a hand." They hesitated, then slowly boarded their recall platform. As they lifted toward their ships, they looked down one last time, at the woman, at John, at the Dean, at the silent circle of monoliths still partly embedded in the earth. A species they had underestimated had just rewritten their destiny. The dropship engines of the Dominion fleet roared to life. The sky filled with streaks of light, and as ship after ship jumped into the void, carrying with them a message that would resound across thousands of worlds. When the last vessel vanished, you'd stretched. "Well," he said, "that'll shake up interstellar politics for a while." The woman exhaled softly. "Good. Some things need shaking." The dog pressed against her leg, satisfied. She smiled faintly and placed her hand on its head. "Come on," she murmured. "We've got work to do. Empires fall. But peace has to be built." John chuckled and maintained, "Usually with more coffee." She nodded once, eyes sharp but softened. "We'll need plenty." They walked together across the cracked field, the monolith sinking slowly back into the earth as though returning to sleep. Above them, humanity's hidden satellites faded back into the invisible.